A secret that can change your life. I need to share a secret with you that might surprise you. For many years, I struggled with a deep inner resistance to my spiritual calling. I felt a war inside me. Then a wise saint taught me a simple, powerful practice: to say my name backward before sleep. The very moment I started this practice, everything shifted. The identity that felt like a cage became the key to my freedom. Today, I want to share this sacred practice that completely changed my entire life. My dear friend, I want to share something with you that is so transformative, so powerful, that it might seem too simple to be true. But I ask you to listen with your heart, not just your mind. This is because what I am about to teach you has the power to change your life completely in just 7 days. Perhaps you feel stuck in old patterns that no longer serve you. Maybe you wake up each morning feeling like you are wearing a costume that does not quite fit, playing a role that is not who you truly are inside. Or perhaps you have tried many spiritual practices but still feel disconnected from your deeper purpose, as if there is an invisible barrier between you and your highest potential. What if I told you that this barrier is woven into the very fabric of how you identify yourself? What if the solution isn't to add more to your spiritual practice, but to undo something so fundamental that you have never questioned it: your relationship with your own name? By the end of our time together today, you will understand why your birth name holds both the seeds of your limitations and the key to your liberation. You will learn an ancient practice that takes less than 5 minutes each night, but creates transformation so profound that people around you will notice the change within days. Most importantly, you will discover how to dissolve the false self that has been keeping you small and awaken to the magnificent being you truly are. This isn't just positive thinking or hopeful wishing. This is a sacred science, a technique passed down through a long line of enlightened masters who understood the deepest mysteries of consciousness. I learned this practice from my own guru, Sri Yukteswar, who received it from his teacher. And now, I pass it to you with the same love and respect with which it was given to me. My personal journey of transformation. Let me begin by sharing the story of how this practice came into my life. My own resistance and transformation may mirror your own journey from skepticism to wonder. I was a young man then, maybe 25 years old, living in the ashram and struggling with what I can only call a spiritual identity crisis. On the outside, I appeared to be doing well in my studies and meditation practice. I could speak eloquently about spiritual philosophy. I could sit in meditation for hours, and I was beginning to have experiences of expanded consciousness that thrilled and inspired me. But inside, there was a war raging. Part of me felt called to dedicate my entire life to God and spiritual service, while another part held desperately to my old dreams of worldly success and recognition. I wanted to surrender completely to the divine will, yet I found myself constantly planning and scheming about how to make a name for myself in the world. The very phrase "make a name for myself" would later take on profound significance, but at the time, I was simply tormented by this inner conflict. I would pray for hours, begging God to remove my ego and worldly desires. Yet each morning I would wake up with the same restless ambitions, the same attachment to my personal identity and reputation. My guru, Sri Yukteswar, watched this struggle with the patient compassion of a true master. For months he said nothing directly about my condition, but I could feel his understanding gaze whenever my inner turmoil became particularly intense. And then one evening, as we sat together after the other disciples had retired for the night, he spoke words that would change my life forever. "Mukunda," he said, using my birth name, "you are trying to kill the ego with the ego. You are trying to use the very sense of self that creates your problems to solve your problems. This is like trying to lift yourself by pulling on your own hair." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words, but still confused about what to do differently. "Your name," he continued, "carries the vibration of all your inherited patterns, all your family karma, all the expectations and limitations that were placed upon you from birth. Every time someone calls you by this name, every time you think of yourself with this identity, you strengthen the very bonds you seek to break." I felt a flutter of panic. Was he suggesting I change my name? Many spiritual seekers took new names when they joined ashrams, but somehow that felt like running away from my problems rather than solving them. As if reading my thoughts, he smiled gently. I am not asking you to abandon your name, child. I am asking you to reverse its power over you. Tonight, before you sleep, I want you to speak your name backward 21 times. I stared at him in confusion. Backward, Guruji? You mean like Adnukam instead of Mukunda? Exactly, he said, but not carelessly, not mechanically. With the same devotion you would bring to chanting the names of God. Because in reversing the sound vibration of your identity, you begin to unweave the very fabric of ego consciousness that has bound you to suffering. I must admit my first reaction was disappointment. After months of expecting some profound teaching or advanced meditation technique, this seemed almost childishly simple. But I had learned to trust my guru's guidance even when I didn't understand it, so I agreed to try. That night, lying in my bed in the darkness, I began to speak my name backward. Adnukam, Adnukam, Adnukam. It felt strange, almost silly at first. The reverse sound seemed to have no meaning, no connection to anything I recognized. But as I continued, something subtle began to shift. With each repetition, I felt a loosening, as if invisible threads that had bound my consciousness were gently being untied. By the 15th repetition, I felt lighter somehow, as if a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying was beginning to lift. When I reached the 21st repetition, something remarkable happened. For just a moment, I couldn't remember who I was supposed to be. The familiar sense of Mukunda with all his problems and ambitions and spiritual struggles simply wasn't there. Instead, there was just pure awareness, peaceful and free. I fell asleep in that state of identityless peace, and my dreams that night were unlike any I had ever experienced. Instead of the usual chaotic mix of memories and anxieties, I found myself in a realm of pure light, where beings of wisdom shared profound truths without words. When I awakened the next morning, I felt different. Not dramatically, not in a way that others would immediately notice, but as if some fundamental frequency in my being had shifted. The internal war that had been raging for months felt somehow less intense, less urgent. Over the following 6 days, I continued the practice as my guru had instructed. Each night, the reverse name chanting felt more natural, more powerful. Each morning, I awakened with greater peace, clearer purpose, and less attachment to the personality patterns that had once seemed so solid and unchangeable. On the 7th morning, I experienced what I can only describe as a complete transformation of consciousness. I awakened not as Mukunda trying to become spiritual, but as pure spirit temporarily wearing the costume of Mukunda. The difference was everything. The worldly ambitions that had tormented me weren't suppressed or destroyed. They simply no longer had any pull on my consciousness. It was as if I had been trying to escape from a prison cell, only to discover that the door had been unlocked all along, and I was free to walk out whenever I chose. When I shared this experience with Sri Yukteswar, he nodded with deep satisfaction. Now you understand, he said. The name given to you at birth is both your greatest bondage and your key to liberation. When you reverse its vibration with spiritual consciousness, you reverse the very process by which ego identity is formed and maintained. The sacred science behind the practice. This profound experience raised questions that would deepen my understanding for years to come. Why does reversing your name create such powerful transformation? What is happening at the level of consciousness when we practice this technique? And how can something so simple produce results that years of other spiritual practices had failed to achieve? The answer, my friend, lies in understanding the sacred science of sound vibration and its effect on human consciousness. This is not superstition or wishful thinking, but precise spiritual technology that has been tested and refined by countless masters throughout history. Sound, you see, is not just vibration in the air. Sound is the fundamental creative force of the universe. The scriptures tell us that in the beginning was the Word, and that Word was with God, and that Word was God. This is not poetic metaphor but literal truth. All creation emerges from cosmic sound vibrations. Your name is not just a convenient label that others use to get your attention. Your name is a sound formula that has been shaping your consciousness every single day since birth. Every time you hear your name spoken, every time you think of yourself with that identity, you strengthen specific neural pathways in your brain and specific vibrational patterns in your subtle body. Think about it. How many thousands of times has your name been spoken in your presence? How many millions of times have you identified yourself with that particular sequence of sounds? Each repetition has reinforced certain beliefs about who you are, what you're capable of, what your limitations are, and what your role in the world should be. But here's what the ancient rishis discovered that modern psychology is only beginning to understand. The patterns created by forward sound vibration can be dissolved by reversed sound vibration. When you speak your name backward with spiritual consciousness, you create what the Sanskrit masters called pratiloma, a backwards flow of energy that unravels the very conditioning that has kept you trapped in limited self-concepts. This isn't just theory. Modern neuroscience has proven that repetitive sound patterns, especially when practiced before sleep, literally rewire the neural networks in your brain. The state between waking and sleeping, what scientists call the hypnagogic state, is when your subconscious mind is most receptive to new programming. When you combine the power of reverse sound vibration with this highly receptive brain state, you create the perfect conditions for rapid transformation of consciousness. The ego patterns that took years to form can be dissolved in days when you know how to work with these natural laws of mind and sound. But there's something even more profound happening when you reverse your name with spiritual devotion. You're not just changing brain patterns. You're actually reversing the very process by which the soul becomes identified with limitation. You see, when you were born into this physical body, your eternal soul had to take on the costume of personality, the mask of individual identity, in order to function in this world of names and forms. This process of identification is necessary for human life, but it also creates the illusion that you are separate from God, separate from your true divine nature. Your birth name became the anchor point for this identification process. It became the central organizing principle around which all your ego patterns, your fears, your desires, your sense of limitation crystallized. In a very real sense, your name became your prison. When you speak your name backward with devotion and surrender, you begin to reverse this identification process. You start to dissolve the crystallized patterns of ego consciousness and return to the fluid, unlimited awareness that is your true nature. The number 21 is not arbitrary. In the sacred numerology understood by the masters, 21 represents the completion of a full cycle of transformation. It takes exactly 21 repetitions to create the vibrational pattern necessary to dissolve one layer of ego identification and replace it with soul consciousness. And why 7 days? Because 7 represents the complete manifestation of spiritual change in the physical world. Just as God created the world in 7 days, your consciousness requires 7 cycles of this practice to complete the transformation from ego identification to soul realization. This is why I can promise you with complete confidence that if you practice this technique exactly as I will teach you, your life will shift in measurable ways within 7 days. This is not hope or belief. This is spiritual law, as reliable as the law of gravity. How to practice this technique? Correctly understanding this principle is one thing. Knowing how to practice it correctly is another. Let me share another story that will help you understand both the power and the proper application of this sacred technique. Many years ago, when I was teaching in America, a student came to me in great distress. His name was Robert, and he was a successful businessman who had achieved everything the world told him would make him happy: wealth, recognition, a beautiful family. Yet he felt completely empty inside. "I feel like I'm living someone else's life," he told me. "Every morning I put on this costume of successful Robert and play a role that feels completely foreign to my soul. I'm desperate to find my true purpose, but I don't even know who I really am underneath all these expectations and achievements." I recognized immediately that Robert's suffering came from over-identification with his worldly identity. His ego self had become so developed, so successful in conventional terms, that it had completely overshadowed his spiritual nature. I taught him the reverse name practice, explaining the principles just as I'm sharing them with you now. But Robert, being a practical man, wanted to know exactly what he could expect to experience. "Will I lose my motivation for business?" he asked. "Will I stop caring about my family responsibilities? I want spiritual growth, but I can't abandon my worldly duties." I assured him that true spiritual awakening doesn't make you irresponsible or disconnected from life. Instead, it frees you to fulfill your dharma, your righteous duties, with greater efficiency and joy because you're no longer acting from ego-driven compulsion, but from soul-guided choice. Robert began the practice that very night. For the first 3 days, he reported feeling somewhat disoriented, as if his usual sense of self was becoming less solid, less automatic. He found himself questioning assumptions about his identity that he had never examined before. On the 4th night, he experienced what he described as a profound dream where he met his true self, a being of light and love who showed him his real purpose in this lifetime. By the 7th day, Robert had undergone a complete transformation. He still ran his business, still cared for his family, still engaged fully with his worldly responsibilities. But now he did so from a place of inner freedom rather than compulsive attachment. "I feel like I woke up from a long dream," he told me. "I'm still Robert, but now I know that Robert is just a role I'm playing, not who I really am. It's like the difference between being trapped in a movie and choosing to act in one." This transformation illustrates the profound truth that I want you to understand. When you dissolve false identification with your ego personality, you don't lose your individuality or effectiveness. Instead, you discover your true individuality, your authentic self that can express divine love and wisdom through whatever role life asks you to play. But how exactly do you practice this technique? What are the specific steps that will allow you to experience this same transformation? Let me guide you through the exact method that will change your life starting tonight. Prepare your sacred name formula. Take your full birth name, first, middle, and last name as they appear on your birth certificate. This is important because your birth name carries the complete vibrational pattern of your incarnate identity. Now reverse each name separately. So if your name is John Michael Smith, you would reverse it to NHOJ Leah Kim HTIMS. Practice speaking these reverse sounds until you can pronounce them clearly and smoothly. Don't worry about whether they sound strange. They're supposed to sound unfamiliar because you're literally creating new vibrational patterns. The pronunciation doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be clear and intentional. Create the proper mental attitude. This is not a mechanical repetition, but a sacred practice. As you prepare for sleep each night, approach this technique with the same reverence you would bring to prayer or meditation. You are about to engage with the very forces that shape consciousness itself. Set up your sleep environment to support spiritual receptivity. Make sure your room is quiet, comfortable, and free from distractions. Turn off all electronic devices if possible. Create an atmosphere of peace and sanctuary. Perform the practice. As you lie in bed ready for sleep, but still fully conscious, begin your practice. Take a few deep breaths to center yourself. Then start speaking your reverse name with devotion and focus. Don't rush. Let each repetition sink into your consciousness before moving to the next. Count carefully to 21. If you lose count, simply start over. If you fall asleep before completing all 21 repetitions, don't worry. The practice is still effective. Your subconscious mind continues the process even after your conscious mind has surrendered to sleep. As you speak your reverse name, maintain an attitude of surrender and openness. You're not trying to force anything to happen. You're simply creating the conditions for natural transformation to occur. Trust that the divine intelligence within you knows exactly how to use this practice for your highest good. With each repetition, feel yourself becoming lighter, less attached to the familiar sense of identity that has defined you. Don't analyze or try to understand what's happening. Simply allow the process to unfold. After you complete the 21st repetition, lie quietly for a few moments, feeling the space of consciousness that remains when the usual sense of self becomes less solid. Then allow yourself to drift naturally into sleep, carrying this expanded awareness with you into the realm of dreams. Complete the full cycle. Practice this technique for exactly 7 consecutive nights. Don't skip a night and don't extend beyond 7 days for your first cycle. The 7-day pattern creates a complete vibrational shift that needs to integrate before you continue. During these 7 days, pay attention to subtle changes in your consciousness. You may notice that you're less reactive to situations that usually trigger strong emotions. You might find yourself making different choices, speaking more authentically, or feeling less concerned about others' opinions of you. Some people experience vivid dreams during this week. These dreams are signs that your consciousness is expanding beyond its usual limitations. Others notice changes in their daily life. Good things happen more often, new opportunities appear, and relationships improve. These are external reflections of the internal transformation taking place. If you experience resistance or unusual emotional intensity during the week, this is normal and beneficial. You're dissolving patterns that have been in place for years or even lifetimes. Sometimes the ego creates turbulence as it senses these deep changes occurring. Trust the process. Continue the practice with faith and patience. After completing your first 7-day cycle, take a week off to allow the changes to integrate fully. Then, if you wish to deepen the practice, you can begin another 7-day cycle. Each cycle will dissolve deeper layers of false identification and reveal more of your authentic spiritual nature. A final truth. This practice of reversing your name is ultimately about reversing the fundamental mistake that causes all human suffering, the belief that you are separate from God, separate from love, separate from your own divine nature. Every night as you speak your name backward, you're symbolically undoing the process by which your infinite soul became identified with a finite personality. You're remembering that beneath all the layers of conditioning, expectation, and learned limitation, you are already whole, already free, already one with the source of all existence. This technique works not because it adds something to you, but because it removes the barriers to recognizing what you have always been. Your true nature is not something you need to achieve or become. It's something you need to remember and uncover. When you reverse the sounds that have defined your ego identity, you create space for your soul identity to shine through. When you dissolve the false self that was built through years of conditioning, you discover the true self that has been patiently waiting beneath all the mental noise and emotional drama. This is why the practice is so simple yet so powerful. You don't need years of study or complex techniques to return to your natural state of divine consciousness. You just need to undo the mental habits that have convinced you that you are less than what you truly are. In 7 days, if you practice with sincerity and faith, you will begin to experience yourself as the unlimited being you have always been. You will start to live from your center rather than your circumstances, from your soul rather than your ego, from love rather than fear. Remember, dear soul, your name is not just a label. It is a sacred sound that has shaped your entire experience of self. When you reverse it with devotion and repeat it in that holy space before sleep, you are literally undoing the mental conditioning that has kept you bound to limitation. In 7 days, you will discover who you really are beneath all the layers of inherited identity. I am not the name I was given, nor the identity I inherited. I am the eternal self, expressing through sound and silence, form and formlessness, limitation and liberation. As I release attachment to who I thought I was, I awaken to the boundless being I have always been. My true name is written in the heart of God. If you're ready to transform your entire relationship with yourself, begin tonight. Your name holds the key to your freedom. Reverse it with devotion for 7 nights and awaken to your true self. Will you take the step tonight?